Welcome everyone. Today we are creating a new web app using the newly supported container images as outputs. The basic tools we are using is Visual Studio Community, Visual Studio Code, Docker, Microsoft SQL Management Studio, and Microsoft SQL Server Engine. What we are going to do is create a Microsoft SQL database inside a container, create a new web app or the website code, add authentication and update the database, or in other words, modify the code, and we'll publish the app as an image. The container images are now a supported output type of .NET SDK, so we're going to use it. Then, and lastly, we'll run the Microsoft SQL database and the web app as containers. This is the documentation that you will need. It consists of built-in container support for .NET, how to scaffold identity in ASP.NET Core, and the necessary changes to the authentication. We will be following our own documentation. We advise you to create something similar to this, but the official documentation is more than enough. This is the documentation necessary to publish any .NET to an image. You also need this documentation for the identity on ASP.NET Core. In this case, we will be creating a web app with the individual authentication or local authentication. And you will also need this specific part in the identity scaffolder in order to install the code generator and the necessary packages. We will be starting in Visual Studio Code. First, we create a new volume, the Docker Compose YAML file. In this case, we're just setting the ports, the volumes, the name of the server, and we specify that we are using the Microsoft SQL. After that, we kill the terminal to close the connection. You can then create a new repository to save your code if you want to. It is not necessary. In this case, we already done that. In the Visual Studio terminal, navigate to the folder you want to create the web app code. Then you run the following command. Notice that we are using individual authentication. Once the project is created, you can check it in the folder Explorer. You can then open the project using Visual Studio. If you create the repository, Git will recognize the changes. Feel free to commit if you want. Next, select your Solution Explorer and open the App Settings JSON. We need to modify the connection string in order to do the first migration. If it doesn't work, please specify it with your IP. Once the web app is wired to the Microsoft SQL database, we can apply the first migration. This approach is called Code First Database. So we will start by opening the Package Manager console and we will run the following command. Once the generation of the tables is complete, we can make use of the built-in container support for .NET. We need to first add the following package. We can now create Docker images with one single command. Notice that this command replaces any existing images, so it's not creating new image, it's always replacing. Now we can run the web app inside the container, just to test if everything is working already. Once it's complete, you can verify if it is working in localhost 5010. Notice that the privacy is still not working and neither is authentication. This is because we still have some things to change. Before we make the changes, you can remove or stop the web app container. As expected, the web app stops working. So let's now modify the code. Start by opening the program.cs. Search for the user authorization and add app use authentication just above it. Open the Package Manager console and add all necessary packages and install the tools. These are the following that you need to install. You can either copy-paste them individually or copy-paste them all at once. Once all packages and tools are installed, we can now generate the code. You can run this command to generate the ASP.NET code. This will create the account register, login, logout, and register confirmation. All of this is needed for the authentication. If you are following this tutorial to make a production web app, you should remove the test verification and add your custom service or a third-party service to make the email verifications. Since we are just testing, we will keep it and we will not make any changes. If you are doing in production, set it to false and make the necessary changes. You can also make certain pages as private. In other words, only valid users can access that specific page. In this example, we will just make the privacy page as private. You need to be logged in order to see that page. Otherwise, it will redirect you to the register page. Now that we are done with the modifications, save everything and build. In the future, if you make further modifications in the entities or pages, you might need to create a new migration. If that is the case, you need to run the following command. You can then update the database using this command. This will update the database. Now that we finish modifying the code, we can create a new image. We run again the same command, .NET publish. Remember, this command writes on top of the existing image. You will open the Visual Studio again and run the web app image with a container. This is the following command that you need to run. It's the same as the one before. Now we can test everything. Notice that the privacy page is only accessible to those who are logged in. Otherwise, it will redirect you to the register page. So let's now register a new account. This account will be saved in the Microsoft SQL database. Once complete, you will need to verify. If you are in production, you need to change this. This is just a test. So in production, you need a service to send an email or a message to a cell phone. The login is now possible because the account is verified. Once the login is done, notice that you have access to the privacy pages. As a final check, let's take a look at the Microsoft SQL Management Studio. Verify directly if the tables were filled or not. Just remember that you can delete images and the containers, but if you delete the volumes, it will delete all of the data. As you can see, the data is being filled properly. From this point forward, you can further modify the website as you please. Since this is just to cover the basics, we will stop here. We will see you in another video.